Washington won the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To a special bonus edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Alex Katson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Alex, we are here today because you and I were kind of talking about this. We were like, hey, we got to talk some basketball after Desmond Claude committed to Washington, because this just raises all of the expectations that we have for Danny Sprinkle and this basketball team this season. Desmond Claude, this past year at USC, led the team in scoring with 15.1 points per game, also led them in assists, and I believe it was 4.2 per contest. So this is a really high-impact wing guy with 1 year of eligibility remaining, who's just going to step in and start right away for this roster. And this was the piece that we've been talking about for a while in terms of Washington needs one more high-end wing guy to round out this roster. And this is just a fantastic addition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously anytime you can grab the number one player available in the portal, even as we get into the later stages here, and grab a guy that led a Big Ten team in scoring as you enter your second year in the Big Ten, obviously USC is also, but anytime that you can grab a guy like that to kind of fill the one hole that we kind of had still for as far as the starting five goes on this basketball team, I think you feel pretty good about that. And I think Claude fits in really well with what Danny Sprinkle and the Huskies want to do on offense, especially. Claude is more of a primary ball handler for USC, but I think he's going to move a little bit off the ball, gives you a little bit more versatility in terms of anyone can initiate offense now, whether it's going to be him or Wesley Yates or Quimari Peterson or Diallo. Like all of those guys are capable of initiating the offense. And I think that gives you a lot more versatility than they've had this last season in Sprinkle's first year.
Absolutely. And it's something where, you can talk about his defense and just say he's also a really high level defender, which is something that I don't want to say this team desperately lacked last year, because we saw guys like Tyler Harris really improve on that end of the floor throughout the season. But it's just something where it's very clear that that team was just not experienced enough to get the job done. As whatever our expectations might have been for them going into the year last year, as the season played out, it was okay. It was very obvious where the holes were on that roster. And now we look at this one, all of those holes are kind of gone. And it's something where, we look at what the recruitment process was for this final edition, right? Where it was supposed to be, one of these big time guys, whether there are a whole bunch of guys that ended up going elsewhere, where if Darian Williams was a target at one time, I just think about all the different names just kind of in that mold of Danny Sprinkle really wanted to go out and just have one of these high impact guys at the position for 1 year. Ty and Grant Foster was another one who ended up signing with Gonzaga. But I kind of look at this position as a whole, and this is everything that, I feel like people, and myself included, I was really high on him, expected Tyler Harris to be moving forward. But obviously, with him going elsewhere, it was, okay, who's going to step into this role? And I think Danny Sprinkle has just done such a masterful job of improving this roster in multiple ways, where it's not all hinging on one person like it was with Great Osborne last year. And, you look at just all the different roles that you're going to see from just this projected starting five that you did a fantastic job writing about over on Huskies Wire, where right now it's Quimari Peterson, Wesley Yates, Desmond Claude. I was like, wait, hold on. Who am I missing here? Jacob Ognacevic and Frank Kepnon. So you got 4 transfers in there, and I'm sure some people are going to look at that and say, oh, that's a little concerning, because we saw the chemistry be a little off last year with that many new faces on the roster. But this just feels different.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think there's probably some valid concern there, especially you have a lot of guys that are used to being offense initiators, being sort of the focal point of an offense, right? Where Ognacevic and Peterson are both conference players of the year last year. Yeah. Obviously, we talked about Claude led USC in scoring. Yates led all Big Ten freshmen in scoring during conference play last season. All of these guys are used to getting their own shots off. And so how they work within the system is going to be something to watch, certainly. But at the same time, you have such a good mix of experienced guys with some more youth than you had last year, where last year it was the team was just so inexperienced kind of all overall. And the grad transfers that they did bring in didn't really provide the impact that they were really looking for. And so you kind of got a team that was kind of figuring it all out on the fly while also learning how to play college basketball. And with this team, like you're figuring it all out on the fly, but it's all guys that have played 2, 3, 4 years of college basketball already. They know the environment, they know what they're getting into. You're grabbing guys that have NCAA tournament experience, that have Big Ten experience. Like you're right. It does just feel different this time around.
So I want to go back to one of the things you said, which I think is a really great point. You talk about the questions about how they're all going to work in the system. And I think that's one of the most important points when you talk about Desmond Claude, where you mentioned it. You said he's a primary ball handler, as you know, who led the team in assists at USC last year. And that's something that I just don't think we saw last year when, you know, there were certain rotations on just a certain lineup on the floor, I would say, where you didn't have a second guy who really looked like a distributor. Where when Great Osborne did that, it looked fantastic. And there were different points in time where it just felt like he didn't have that help around him, where I think Zoom Diallo is going to be a phenomenal player. I don't want that to sound like I'm knocking him in any way, shape, or form, because I think he's going to get there. But he was a true freshman. And as Danny Sprinkle said it numerous times last season, those mistakes were going to happen. Careless turnovers, different things like that are just, you know, by definition, a freshman mistake. And that's not going to be a problem anymore this year. And it's great that, you know, Claude can just kind of tie this all together, because one thing that you omitted for no reason other than it wasn't part of the conversation, Quimari Peterson, Wesley Yates, and Jacob Ognacevic all shot over 40% behind the 3-point line last year, which was something this team was just absolutely abysmal at throughout last year. And just seeing those improvements and having two guys in Quimari Peterson and Desmond Claude in the starting five, plus Zoom Diallo, JJ Mandaquit, whoever else you want to say can be a ball handler coming off the bench, adding all of those guys in as well is just going to continue to elevate this roster.
Yeah, it's like what you were talking about earlier, right? Where it doesn't feel like there's one focal point on this team like there was last year with Great, right? Where if Peterson gets into foul trouble or Desmond Claude gets into foul trouble or something like that during the course of a game, you are not suddenly like without a ball handler and an offense initiator for the rest of that time until they come back into the game, right? Like you have someone that is a member of the starting five already that you can sort of have be the primary ball handler. You can bring another wing in off the bench. You can bring Diallo in off the bench. You can bring Mandaquit in off the bench. Like you have so many different options now to get into your offense and to spread the ball around and get it to those guys that are, you know, shooting 40% from three and really like just ride the hot hand kind of every game. And that's the way that successful teams, especially in college basketball, are built. It's very rare that a team is built around just like one guy and those are the teams that make like a super deep run, you know, unless like that guy is Cooper Flag, right? But like, you know, but like none of those guys are that level of talent. Obviously, all of these guys are great, and we're very excited for them to suit up for Washington. But none of them are going to be Cooper Flag. That's just is what it is.
It's unfair expectations.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And so, like, to have that many guys that can initiate the offense and can get hot any night and like distribute the ball and get the ball to the right place, get the ball to the right hand, I think is going to give you a lot more consistency night to night than we saw last season, which was a huge problem for them last season.
No, absolutely. And that's one great way to just kind of lead into the other thing we wanted to talk about, which was the floor and the expectations around this team have just been drastically raised with this commitment. But we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKDOWNCollege for half off your first year. So, Alex, making the NCAA tournament, which for Washington would be the first time since 2019, that feels like the bare minimum at this point, right?
Yeah, I would certainly say so. I mean, to be fair, I think that we probably would have said that last season as well,
We did,
right?
yeah. And we were wrong.
Right, yeah, and, like, obviously, like, things can happen between now and then, right? But I think right now you look at the roster and obviously, like, recency bias aside and everything like that, right? Like, we were talking about it this morning off air, but this is a team that can truly go 12 deep, and all
Yeah,
12 of those are guys that we feel comfortable contributing on a D1 power conference basketball team this season. And so I think in that sense, right, like the tournament has to be the bare minimum, right? And really like winning like one or two games and getting to a Sweet 16, I think should be the expectation at this point, even if that feels very lofty given where this team was last season and having 8 transfers come in and basically building a new team completely from scratch. I think that like that still has to be sort of the expectation going in just on paper from what we have
sure.
right now.
I think that's fair because it's something where, you talk about going 12 deep, where part of the conversation Lars and I've had on the show as well is we can fully expect somebody like Christian Nitu to redshirt, where the long-term potential of a guy like that is so promising. And it's just, he's got such a high ceiling, much in the same vein as what Matty Traore could be, the junior college transfer center. But it's something where, if him and somebody like Jasir Rencher, especially after this commitment, don't end up contributing to this team, that's great because you're still building a long-term future if those guys are sitting comfortable redshirting, which, especially with just the way that this roster was always meant to be constructed, it felt like they had to be on board with that, especially when you look at Nitu. But I look at the one guy who you and I, as you said, in our off conversation this morning, were just over the moon excited about as he continues to just tear it up in the Bundesliga playoffs, where I believe he's still averaging a double-double in Hans Steinbach. It's, he's not a secret anymore, but just having a weapon like that, whether he is starting, which I don't think is likely when you have a senior and Jacob Ognacevic, who, again, as we said, can shoot it from 40% from behind the arc as well, where you can have a guy like that coming off the bench and just really anchoring what could end up being a pretty young lineup if Zoom Diallo is part of that, whether it be, JJ Mandequit, Cortland Muldrew, alongside Bryson Tucker, the Indiana transfer, and Lathan Somerville. Having a guy like that with that kind of experience over in Europe is just such a vital piece of this group.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it gives you a lot of flexibility, right? Like you talked about, like we think Ognacevic is going to start for this team over Steinbach, at least to begin the season, right? And obviously, like
Sure.
maybe Steinbach is just undeniable and he ends up starting, midway through the year. But you take a guy like that and you take a guy like Zoom, who got a ton of experience this season, but is probably still needs a little bit of developing to do, and a former 5-star in Bryson Tucker that needs a little bit more developing to do. And you don't have to get major contributions from those guys right away anymore, right? Like this Claude commitment kind of like finalized that, right? Because
Yeah.
up to this point, it was kind of like, okay, like it looks like Bryson Tucker might be the starter at, on the wing. That's fine, right? Like former 5-star, went to Indiana, played a season in Indiana off the bench, like was decent in a limited role there, but clearly like has a little bit more developing to do. And now you don't need 30 minutes a night from him. You need 10, 15 a night from him. You need 10 or 15 minutes a night from Zoom Diallo. You need 10 or 15 minutes a night from Steinbach. You need maybe like 5 or 10 minutes a night for Mandequit and Muldrew. Like you don't need these guys to be superstars right away, but you're still getting them in the rotation and you're getting them the experience of playing Big Ten basketball to, like you said, build that long-term future of the program where like all those guys are going to be back next year, presumably. And that continues to build sort of the profile of program and, set up the foundation that Danny Sprinkle wants to have here.
And on top of that, as you said, because I'm sure if somebody, just listens to that and might say, wait, 15 minutes a night for Zoom Diallo, as you said, if someone is undeniable, if Zoom takes a major step forward in his development, which I think both you and I expect, or Hans Steinbach, 100%. As where this conversation started, is an undeniable talent, you can make it work. And then all of a sudden you're running just a 7, 8, 9 deep rotation where, all these guys are getting 20, 25 minutes. I'm just throwing numbers out there at this point in time.
Right.
Whatever that rotation ends up looking like. And this is without, one of the biggest keys of all this is Frank Kepnon, because we know what kind of impact Frank Kepnon can have on this team when he's healthy. But unfortunately, that just hasn't been the case for the last few seasons as he's dealt with various knee issues. And I think that's something where Danny referenced it at various times last year. The depth just in the front court was non-existent. at times, which was unfortunate when, Chris Conway goes down with a season-ending injury before the year even starts. And there are just a few other different problems there that come up along the way. He made sure that was not going to be a problem this year. And as I just continue to look at what this roster could, or we know what the roster is going to look like, what this roster could do once we get to, late October, November, December, when the season starts up, I can't help but feel that this team can win multiple games in the tournament.
Yeah, 100%. Because like you said, like we said earlier, right? It's not focused around one guy. If Quimari Peterson has a bad night, the Huskies are not guaranteed to lose the game the way that they were if Great Osibor had a bad night last season, right? If Desmond Claude has a bad night, they're not guaranteed to lose. All of these guys can pick one another up. And that's the beauty of having such a deep roster as well, right? Is that if a guy like Peterson or Wesley Yates or someone like that gets into a slump, Zoom has starting experience in the Big Ten. You can insert him into the starting lineup. You can play around with the lineups a little bit and make it work. Like you said, there are plenty of guys here that have played major roles for successful college basketball teams in the past and are going to play a major role for this team this year. And just finding the right balance of those minutes, I think, is going to be crucial to the ultimate success of the team. But by the time you get into March, you've found that balance already. And then it's just about whether or not those guys stay hot. And if you have three guys that can all shoot 40% from three, one of them is going to make their shots when you get into a tournament game. Not all three of them are going to go, knock on wood, right?
Sure.
But not three of them are going to go cold the same night. And even if they do, you have plenty of other guys that can create off the bounce and create their own shot in different ways, right? Where it just raises the floor so much because you have all of these other options to go to, and you have a deep bench that you can go to if the starters are having an off night. And so there's just so much more room for error than there was last season that I think really is what has you and I so much more optimistic about this season's team.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think you put it perfectly, so we should probably just wrap it up there. Alex, as always, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. Thank all the viewers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. If you want to make sure you're up to date with all the latest bonus content just like this one, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.